So, Thomas, thank you for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Could you give a brief introduction to people that don't already know you, and who you are, what you've been doing recently?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. Really looking forward to it tonight. Should be really good. And look forward to just having a nice conversation with yourself. So yeah, like you mentioned, my name's Thomas Merritt. Uh, I'm a racing driver, UK racing driver, competing in the BRCC Fiesta Junior Championship this year. I started back in 2020. It was a long time ago now, at the age of 10 in karting, and very quickly progressed through the rental stuff into an outdoor championship, same speed as junior road tax, outdoor electric because no owner driver karting series would fit me. And then last year was my first year in car racing, first year in the Fiestas. And we finished third in the rookies. And then this year, we're currently leading the championship 3 rounds in, and just aim to keep the consistency throughout the whole championship.
So, you mentioned you started with karting. Would you say you was young or a late start? How old would you say you was when you started karting?
So I was 10 years old when I first started. Actually, interestingly, I was one of the latecomers. Usually, competitive drivers start at the age of about 4 or 5 in Bambinos. I missed the boat with that, even though I was very heavily into motorsport. I was more of a fan rather than an actual driver itself. So started quite late and didn't go the usual route down owner drivers. I started in rentals, started to move up the ranks. It became apparent that I had a decent amount of talent. And won a few championships. I won the Bayford Meadows Club Championship in 2022. Um, and then I had double vice championships in the TKZ junior light category and the cadet category.
With the rentals, was that indoor, outdoor, or a mix of both?
So it was outdoor. I haven't actually done any indoor karting up to this point, but I would like to give it a go. It does look quite fun. But yeah, all outdoor stuff at Buckmore Park and Bayford Meadows. That's where I started, and then I went to more national circuits such as Clay Pigeon, Rowra, Wilton Mill, etc., which really helped me gain a knowledge of the environment and the racing itself. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it does, rental karting really does teach you the ropes, and the basics of how to drive half sensibly.
Would you say you're quite a quick starter? You mentioned how obviously you started at 10, which is late compared to some people. Would you say you like a few months in it was clear you had like a talent into racing, or was it something that was like a slow development and then suddenly everyone realizing you got up to speed, or how would you say that was in terms of how quick you got up to pace?
So interestingly, I wasn't quick out the box. I did a lot of tutoring with the coaches at Buckmore Park. But the one thing I really struggled with was in the wet driving. It wouldn't grasp with me. Obviously, I'm quite light, so the cart would just understeer, and I really couldn't get to grips with it. But I did a lot of work and a lot of testing on it, and eventually we got there. So I would say for dry running and overall racing, it probably took couple of months, possibly a little bit shorter. But then for wet, I would say potentially a good 4 months, 4 or 5 months.
And how quick did you get into like winning rate from either podiums to then winning races and then if karting championships? What was that process like?
So I think it was a solid probably 4 or 5 rounds. And I didn't actually get a podium before I got a win. I straight away got a win. And then the winter hit. So obviously, like I mentioned, with my wet ability, wasn't quite there. So I went on a bit of a dry spell. And then COVID hit. So it was kind of quite unfortunate where I started. But then when I moved to Bayford Meadows, the championship that I won in 2022. I finished on the podium, or winning races on every single round. And the year before that, I didn't complete the full championship. I completed 6 of the 9 rounds, but even with that, I got podiums in 4 of them. So it was quite a good progression through the COVID years.
Yeah, with the COVID years, was it quite obviously when everything shut down? What did you do in the meantime? Was it a lot of like, did you have like some sim racing like you do at home, or how did you keep yourself, up to speed?
So yeah, that's a really good question. Interestingly, I didn't actually have a simulator at the time. So that was something I invested in towards the latter part of COVID, but I didn't really have the knowledge of sim racing at that particular point. So throughout COVID, interestingly, my motorsport actually took a bit of a dry spell, and it was my last year in primary school. So I focused a lot on the schooling side of things, and would watch huge amounts of racing. But unfortunately, just not having a simulator or being able to practice anywhere really set me back almost, and I had to almost restart from scratch with the understanding of the basics. So I was quite fortunate in that sense, but actually over COVID, I didn't do a lot of training.
Is it more of when people do sim racing for yourself? You mentioned how currently this is at the point where you're doing karting. Do people play? Like you could either do sim racing games or you can get like karting ones. Do people do sim racing to keep up to date with like basic skills, or is it more of the tried race karts and games?
Well, I certainly do. I use sim racing a lot for my real life racing, and also my ultimate focus is GT and endurance racing. And the simulators like iRacing and Assetto Corsa, Competizione, and things like that really allow me to get the understanding of endurance that I need. You know, fuel saving, tire management, pit stops, driver swaps through the night, all of those sort of techniques that could be used in the sim, especially when I move up the ranks, hopefully, I'll be able to transfer that knowledge. But even now, you know, racing in the Fiestas, I've got really good mods on Assetto Corsa and cars on iRacing that I can use, and it gives almost one-on-one feedback. And for example, the first round this year at Snetterton, I came away from it and I wanted to work on a few bits, so I came back to the simulator, and the bits that I wanted to work on in the Fiesta tried on the sim and it worked. So it just goes to show that one-on-one realism.
And then with obviously you being quite young at the time and doing the karting and obviously having to balance school at the same time, would you say your parents were quite good at like they were happy and pushing you on with the racing, or is it something that it maybe took a bit longer for them to understand, or would you say they were very very good with it?
So interestingly, I didn't really get a choice. I didn't get to do other sports. Of course, I always had a choice, but my parents both grew up in the sport. I'm the third generation of racing driver in my family. My granddad raced, my dad raced, and now I race. And my mum worked in the marketing and PR section of Brands Hatch, and my dad was on the instructing side down in the race school. And that's where they met. So that's why Brands Hatch has got such a special place in my heart. But when I said I wanted to, you know, get experience with racing karts and hopefully move up the ladder, they're very enthusiastic about it. And all the way up to now, my dad's been so supportive, and so has my mum as well. Working 24/7 round the clock, even with their own jobs, they've been so supportive and so helpful. And I certainly couldn't do it without them.
Do you think they're a big factor into obviously you need to be able to be good yourself, but in terms of winning the championship in 2022, would you say they was a big part of that as well?
100%. A lot of other drivers, you know, opted not to test in the wet, or not go to all the testing schedule that was available, turn up late for the events, and you know, only just get there for the briefing or signing on. Whereas with myself and my family, which both massively helped, my dad would always get me there on time, so we had plenty of time to do a track walk and get the knowledge of what the conditions were. We would turn up to every event for testing, whether it be dry, wet, cloudy, cold, whatever. We would always be there, which allowed me to gain the valuable knowledge that I needed to take in and win the championship.
What were some of the key skills you learned in winning that championship that you might have not have already learned just doing karting before that? Obviously getting wins and podiums, but actually winning a championship. Was there any standout factors that you got taught doing that?
For sure. I think the main thing that I could take from karting, to transfer to now, is the smoothness and consistency you have to have. Obviously, throughout the championship, you need to be scoring valuable points each round, which means your lines, your braking points, your turning in points have all got to be spot on every single lap. So you're not allowing anyone to come through, and you can keep your lap times down to a minimum as much as possible. And I think that's one thing I've carried all the way through me, even with the car racing as well. Obviously, there is racecraft. management in the karting, but obviously you don't have mirrors, which now I do in cars. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But I think the main thing is smoothness and consistency for sure.
Would you say there was any off the track things that you learned, like any skills, or maybe it was managing things mentally? Was there any off the racetrack things that you learned that season?
For sure. We started the social media side of things that year as well. So I think the main thing that I could take away off the circuit was one, the media presence, interviews, acting professional off the circuit, not getting downbeat or negative if you had a bad incident. Of course, you get experience with being in the steward's office, whether it be your fault or not. It's good, valuable experience to take forward into your motorsport journey. And I think ultimately just being around in amongst that paddock and networking, I think is the main thing I could take away. Obviously now it's so important for sponsorship and bits and bobs like it. I think it's so key and valuable to just get your name out there and be communicating with everyone you can.
And then after you won this championship, is this when you moved into cars, or was there more karting in between that period?
So after I won Bayford Meadows Junior Club, I moved into a championship called Total Karting Zero, which because I couldn't fit into an owner driver like I mentioned previously because of my age and my weight, nothing would fit me. So we found TKZ, which first of all I competed in the cadet class, which was an outdoor electric championship, interestingly. That went all over the UK, great exposure, ran by Rob Smedley, so that was also a good tie-in there. And that is what I then progressed into in the cadet class for the winter series of 2022 and 2023, and managed to secure a vice championship there. And then we completed the 2023 junior light category, which is the same speed as a junior Rotax. And once again, we secured another vice championship, only 1 point off. Due to a technicality at the end of the season. So that was also a great experience. This time, not only mornings or 1 day events, but actually over a full weekend. So you could get experience of practicing and qualifying and then the racing side of things as well. That was great experience for me to take into what I do now.
With the electric karts, would you say they're like a lot different, or would you say there's a lot of similarities between all the different level of karts you raced at?
So there was definitely a difference between the rentals and the electric karts. The main difference being the speed. Obviously, it's instant power in the electric karts, so you can really drive them on the nose. But the other thing, because of the weight of the batteries, there were 3 batteries in the junior light kart at the back, so of the kart was almost pointing a bit like that, which meant there was lots and lots of grip at the rear, so it was very stable on the exits. But through the corners, you pick up quite a bit of wash and push on scrub. And of course, you couldn't make any setup adjustments. So everyone was having to manage with that. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference between rentals and electric cars.
Would you say working your way up from when you first started karting to where you are now, there's a lot more physical demands with these karts, and especially the ones that are similar to Rotax? Would you say you need to be a lot more physically stronger with them, or would you say it's still okay to be not like training or anything, but just keeping up to date with karting and almost like kart fit? Would you say?
Yeah, I've done a bit of karting this year, and I have to say it's definitely more physically intense than cars. Probably because you're just much lower to the ground, you've got smaller seats, you're throwing it around a lot more, the steering's stiff, you're having to, unload the cart to get it in all these positions. So I would say, and a lot of force on the neck as well. So I would say it's a great way to train, and I would say I would actually put in lots and lots of training for karting, and the difficulty of the training hasn't actually increased too much from Fiestas, purely because the physical demand for both championships were pretty similar. So yeah, karting is definitely physically intense, but it's also a great way to learn and get to that fitness point that you need for cars.
It's funny you say that, because on the last podcast where I interviewed Jason Preble, the GB4 driver, he said the exact same thing. He was like, I was like, how demanding are these GB4 cars? And he mentioned how he went karting previously for 30 minutes, and it's so much more physical, which surprised me in ways. I didn't think, I mean, I guess if you're used to it, it definitely helps, but obviously you've got your back, you've got all sorts that are aching that you won't be used to using, will you, in karts?
Yeah, 100%.
And then with after this, is this when you eventually moved to Fords, or was there any other cars in between this period?
So after I completed the junior light class, I was testing for Fiesta Juniors in that year. That was a bit of a testing slash racing year. And then in 2024, I made the big leap for my first year in car racing. And then I've completed in the juniors again this season. And we're currently halfway through the season.
What would you say was was it a big like shock in terms of when you first got in the car, or was it more like just little steps at a time? How would you say you coped with obviously that change? Because for some people, it's a very big step up.
Yeah, it definitely hit me very hard. There's a lot of differences compared from karts to cars. Main difference being the weight transfer, much heavier cars, the circuits being much wider, gear changes. That was another thing I had to get used to. So yeah, it was definitely a lot different and a shock to the system. But interestingly, it probably only took me a couple of full test days to get acclimatized with it. And then you're not looking for big seconds or yeah, a second almost. You're looking for the little tenths here and there that will add up to a complete lap. So yeah, I definitely took to it quite well. I think there are other drivers that struggle with the difference quite a bit. But I'd say that was one of my strongest suits. I've always been aiming to get to cars and on the sim. I never really used to do karting. I used to train in cars for karts even. So I was definitely more used to it when I stepped up.
And then when stepping up, was it more of someone spotted you through karting, or was it more of you putting yourself in situations and for people to be like, oh, this is what you can do as a step up, and then you obviously pushing on that, or is it more of like I say, like with karting, someone spotted you and be like, oh, do you want to do this?
Yeah, I actually went out and searched for a team myself. After 2023, I secured my odds test, and it was a bit more of I don't want to do karts anymore. I want to step up into cars. So we went on the BRCC website, look around for some teams, and found Race Car Consultants, which I currently run with. Fantastic team, came back with all the answers that we needed, and got me in a car and very quickly got me acclimatized. Great family atmosphere in there, and great feel within the team. So yeah, very happy to go with them, but it was my decision to step up. No one really saw me and was like, I would like to take you on, just because of the fact I wanted to step up, and we had luckily had the funds, and then it was just a process of starting to secure sponsorship, etc.
Would you say that's definitely something a lot of people might struggle with? Obviously, when you're into cars, it might be easier to work your way through different categories of cars. But would you say from going from karting to cars, it's a big jump in terms of some people can just stay at karting for possibly longer than they should have, maybe?
Yeah, I definitely think it's easier to get lost in karts. If you get to senior road tax, people spend huge and huge amounts of budget. And in the grand scheme of things, you're not getting that race car experience. And you're not getting in and amongst the paddock networking with the likes of, if you want to go down the single seater route or GT route, you're not experiencing with those teams that then could potentially take you on board. Don't get me wrong, karting is huge, and many people have for the likes of Formula One drivers or even F2 and F3 all come from karts, but they usually make the step up slightly earlier and don't wait too long. We see a lot of drivers now coming into it when they're like trying to get a dispensation for their super license because they come into cars so young.
Is it something you can tell when racing? Obviously, the other drivers that are in the same championship as you. Would you say you can tell which ones have and haven't done karting, or would you say they're all still on the same level?
You can definitely tell who's done karting, and I don't always think it's for the best reason. Obviously, a lot of the drivers are super talented that come from karts, especially the ones running in, British kart champs or whatnot. But yes, some of the moves, the overtakes that they pull are slightly, should we say, dodgy. And they can sometimes result in a bit of contact, or leaning on you and pushing you wide. Where if you look at people that have done sort of my level of karting or potentially even no karting, they're a lot more settled, and you can race them fair. This is the problem with junior championships where although it's great racing, it's the step up from karts. It's the first car you'll experience. So a lot of people have a few difficulties of getting out of that habit. And we have had a few run-ins this year but it's still fantastic talent out on the grid. And I wouldn't say, don't do karting because it still gives you so many qualities that you can take into cars.
Would you say there's anything specific that attracted you to the current championship with the Fords that you're doing now? Obviously, when you go from karting to any sort of level of cars, you realise there's so many different avenues. It's not just F4, F3, there's so many different ways you can go. Is there anything specific that attracted you to where you are now, or was it more of just the best opportunity at the time?
So when we were looking around, we looked at something like the JSCC, the Citroen Saxos, Ginetta Juniors, F4, although single seats wasn't predominantly the route I wanted to go down. I think the thing that stood out with the Fiesta Junior Championship is one, the budget versus the exposure that we were getting out of it. Every race is live streamed, and the talent pool is fantastic. So the racing is great. So you're able to pick up a lot of tips and craft for your career. Another thing that really stood out was the professional look to the championship. It's got over 20 cars this year. Oh, every car is looking fantastic with deliveries, and it's a much more professional environment. And it runs with a great package as well. So you can always network with other teams if you're looking for that step up, which currently I am, due to me being the senior age that I could be.
And then with all the current team you're in now and all the teams in the championship, how important would you say that team dynamic is?
Yeah, the team dynamic is definitely very important. Some other teams only have, 2 or 3 cars, so there's less data to share off of, meaning they're a little bit further down the grid, or they struggle to dial a setup in. But with my team, they've got many, many championships under their belt, many, many wins and podiums, and they've got a solid, I think it's 7 cars this year. So it's a fantastic amount of drivers within the team that you can feed off of and look at sectors, etc. And also the mechanics and the team owner, David, I have to say, really, really thrives under pressure if there is any issues with the car, and they will get it turned around in no time. So, yeah, that's what really attracted us to the team. And that's why team dynamic is so important, especially with a single make championship such as this.
Would you say, obviously, with the teams and the way you've just worded it, would you say it helps speed up your development as a driver coming into this season?
Yes, definitely. There's a few major teams out on the grid, and race car consultants are definitely helping me get to the front quicker. Last year, there was one round, and then I was pretty much on at the front of the grid, purely down to the driver coaches, Ryan Lindsay and Sid Smith and Ben Ryan, all of which have helped me get to that pace as soon as possible. And taught me an awful lot, which has really helped the progression throughout last year and this year, which other teams, maybe don't have the coaches, or they don't have the amount of drivers to feed off of. So yeah, it's definitely a fantastic team to be with if you're looking for rapid progression.
Have you ever thought of, obviously, when you make the steps up in whichever way you go, trying to bring people that you've been working with all this time with you to help you keep developing in the different levels?
Uh, Something I have thought about. It just depends whether or not the team you step up with or what route you go. If they have that one, knowledge of experience, and two, if they have driver coaches that are more suited to the cars you step up in. But for sure, I would definitely stay in contact with all the driver coaches and mechanics, just to be able to help me progress as quickly as possible. The driver coach that I have currently race GT3s or prototypes, which is the route I want to go down, which could help an awful lot.
Obviously, you're if I'm right, a FF Corse GT Academy driver.
Yes, I certainly am.
How did that happen? If I'm right, saying is there only 9 drivers selected?
There was 9 last year, and they've taken one other this year, so there's 10 of us in total.
So when was that in terms of your racing journey, and how did that whole process go?
So yes, I was testing at Silverstone before the start of the 2024 season, and I was fortunate enough that they were testing the same day with their challenge cars, and I must have done something right out on the circuit and how I presented myself, as they wanted me back, and they contacted me and wanted me to apply for the GT Driver Academy. They sent me a message on Instagram, so I was definitely very, very excited, and signed up straight away. And I went for an interview with the current managers of the academy at the time, Phil Bennett and Mark Armstrong. It wasn't the most easiest of interviews. It was a solid hour, hour and a half. So it was a long interview, long process, due to them shortening the driver list down from about 100, potentially even a little more, down to 9 or 10. So I definitely needed to conduct and present myself in the right way, which I think I did successfully. And I was fortunate enough to be taken on last year, which they helped with the fitness aspect, the media aspect, the driver training aspect, the exposure aspect on social media, and spending time with the team and going to their facilities. And hopefully at the end of this year, I'll have a Ferrari Challenge day where I'm able to drive or have a lap ride, which will be definitely awesome to experience and great experience. As I was taken on again this year, which is fantastic. Obviously, the affiliation with them just does a lot for your social media presence and attracts a lot of sponsors.
What was your reaction when obviously that opportunity came to you? How would you say you reacted? Obviously, you've got to obviously remain calm in these situations and prove yourself, which you clearly have done. But how would you say getting told that for the first time, your reaction was?
Yeah, definitely very, very happy and excited. To be honest with you, I wasn't really expecting the message. So when it came through, I needed to sort of keep a level head, and just present myself in the way I usually would, and react the same. But then once I got the message through to say that I'd been selected as part of their academy, definitely super ecstatic. Obviously, GTs is my ultimate dream, and to have an affiliation with that so early and so young in my career, yeah, was just sort of undescribable, really. And as it's gone on, they've helped me so much that, yeah, they've definitely done what they've promised, and it's done a whole lot for my progression as well as a driver.
In terms of, obviously, you mentioned testing at Silverstone. What other tracks have you either tested at or raced at so far?
So last year, the calendar went to 3 times to Silverstone, twice on the international layout and once on the national layout. We went to Brands Hatch, we went to Snetterton, Alton Park, Thruxton, Croft, and this year we're going to Snetterton twice. We've been there once. We have another round coming up in 2 weeks. I've been to Mallory Park, Anglesey. I've been and then we're going to Silverstone National again, Donington Park, and then finishing Brands Hatch Indy Circuit with the Formula Ford Festival, which will be an awesome event. And it's this sort of experience that you need to then further progress through your career in UK racing.
You found it quite easy to adapt to all these different tracks, especially obviously if you've got them twice in a year, it's probably helpful, especially that first race there. But do you find it something that you're quite easy to adapt to, or does it take quite a bit?
It depends if I've tested there already. We don't do a huge amount of testing, which is why I use the simulator behind me, which really, really helps get acclimatized with the circuits, looking for reference points, braking points, turning in points. I am also an ambassador for Sim Motorsport, which have full motion rigs, which will allow me to pick up on, bumps, aggressiveness of the curbs, which is also really helpful for myself. Depending on whether or not I've been there before, I have VBox data, which is onboard footage, which will allow me again to see points of reference, and speed of the car, and G's, etc., to see if I could be a less aggressive or more aggressive with the car. So there's a lot of tools that I can utilize, and of course, as you mentioned, going there twice in a year, you can then pick up a lot of tips the first time you've been, so then the second time you've been, although everyone else will have an advantage as well, you'll also have the upper edge.
How competitive would you say, obviously, all the drivers and cars? Is it all the cars equal and then it's based on the drivers and the setup, or is it all a bit different? How would you say that dynamic is in terms of the competition?
So Fiesta Juniors is a single make championship, so all the cars are the exact same. So it is down to the driver and setting up the car correctly. Although the car doesn't have a huge amount of setup adjustments you can make, you can adjust a few things, but ultimately it's down to driver, and it's down to you to race the correct way, drive the car the correct way. That was another thing that I had to adapt to the front wheel drive characteristics of the car, which I think I managed quite well. And then it's purely just based on your driving performance, which is why utilizing simulators and onboard footage is so key.
Would you say that definitely helps with your confidence then, in terms of obviously when you're doing well, knowing it's very much a driver thing, definitely helps with your confidence?
Definitely. After having such a strong start to the year, it's definitely boosted my morale, my confidence. Obviously, I can't rest and rely on my morals because the competition is so tough and you're talking thousandths of a second. So I have to be on my A game every single time, reset, forget about the last weekend. But as you mentioned, definitely knowing I've got that pace around those circuits, definitely boost my confidence going into the weekend, which will allow me to have a slightly better chance, even if it's not on results, but just being in and amongst the crowd and portraying myself in the best way.
And with the Ford Championship, did you get a podium or a win first, like karting? Which one came first?
So it was a podium that came first at Croft Circuit last year. It took until round five. So that just goes to show the progression of it. And then I managed to pick up my first win the next round at Silverstone National. And I was only on the podium twice last year, which you could say it was a tough season, but actually in the hindsight, we were constantly finishing in the top five and top four, which showed we had good pace as a rookie. And then this year, we've been on the podium 6 out of 7 times this year. We've had 4 wins, all in a row now, and 2 second places, which has been a great start to the season. And we just want to carry the momentum forward now.
With obviously getting your first win at Silverstone, would you say that was definitely a very proud moment? Obviously, Silverstone is one of the most memorable tracks in the whole world, not just the UK. Would you say that was definitely, you were glad to get your first win at that track?
I'm certainly happy. It didn't quite come the way I wanted to. There's a few penalties that boosted me up. I still got a podium overall, but there was a few penalties that just boosted me up to the win. So it wasn't like, yes, I got the win, because ultimately it was gifted. But at the same time, I was extremely happy to come away with my first win. And ultimately, it boosted the morale. And like you say, round such an iconic circuit such as Silverstone, it definitely meant a lot. And I was, over the moon to secure my first win.
And with that being obviously your first win, what would you say the most memorable moment has been so far?
I would have to say my last round of this year's championship at Anglesey up in Wales. I had GCSEs either weekday, so I had GCSEs on the Friday, which meant we missed testing and arrived very late, as it's about a 7 hour trip up for me. And then I had a GCSE on the Monday, so it was really crammed in for Saturday and Sunday. But so everything just clicked that weekend. The media presence, the networking, the driving, everything came together. Free practice was in the wet, so we didn't actually have any dry experience going into the weekend. And in practice, we managed third place. We knew the people up in front had a bit of a toe, so that we knew ultimately we could be fighting at the front end. Qualifying was dry, so it was the first time that weekend I'd driven in the dry, and other people had tested in the dry on the Friday. And we managed to secure pole by half a hundredths of a second, which was very tight, but at the same time, ultra positive. And once again, we knew we had good pace going into Sunday. And Sunday, we managed to clean sweep it, even with the fastest lap. So we had 3 out of 3 wins, a fastest lap, bonus points for leading laps. So ultimately, the whole weekend just came together and clicked. And I have to say that's my most memorable moment, knowing that I put everything together, family were there, and it was just an awesome weekend to be at.
Has there been a break since then, or was that the last thing you did?
So there's been a bit of a break. We've had about 6 weeks now. It will be 6 weeks when we race at Snetterton on the 19th and 20th of July. So quite a big break, but I've been flat out in between. I've been putting in the hours behind me on the sim. I have a 24-hour race this weekend, and I'm going to places like Goodwood, visiting. I'm doing a lot of testing down at Sim Motorsport, working on the coaching side of things as well down at Sim Motorsport. I'm keeping up to date with lots of hobbies and lots of activities, playing golf, going for nice walks and runs and fitness, etc. So yeah, I've definitely been keeping active, but enjoying it, enjoying life. It's nice to have the break from GCSEs, and it's nice to have a long summer.
Would you say that's definitely, obviously, it sounded like a pretty perfect weekend, but coming into a break after that race, would you say that was even better?
I think it was. We hadn't had much of a break from round two and Anglesey at Mallory Park, so I think it was nice to have this break now where I can reset, come off of the high, and keep myself grounded ahead of Snetterton, where I can hopefully pick up a few more good results. And it's allowing me to put in the work behind the sim. Because although we did grab pole last year and a couple of podiums, I'm always looking to improve, as I know there was pace there. So we'll wait and see what happens at Snetterton, but it's definitely been nice to reset over this long break.
And you mentioned obviously with your sim racing, how's that been going? Do you take that almost just as like seriously and as competitive as your racing? It sounds like you're doing that a lot of the time. Some people don't like it as much as others. Some people just want to race and not do any sim work, whereas some people absolutely love it. Would you definitely say as well, there's a crossover, like your sim work definitely benefits you when you go into race weekends?
For sure, it definitely benefits me in my real life race weekends. It allows me to have like data and telemetry, and I can compare that to the real car as well to see what I'm doing differently or the same, and what's working or what's not. And then, like you mentioned, I do take my sim racing very seriously. I'm part of an esports team, Phoenix Sim Racing, which has been great to me. And I'm competing in the Spa 24 with them this weekend. And like I mentioned, I love doing these enduros. They're great fun. But at the same time, it's good to stay in that competitive edge. I've always got a competitive edge and want to win. So I think this will be great this weekend. And I do a lot of other like sprint races and stuff just to keep me in the loop with the racecraft and make sure I'm staying fresh and up to date with it all to not lose focus and concentration.
How often would you say you do sim racing then? Is it more like a couple times a week or once a week, every other week? How often would you say are doing sim racing?
So in terms of the esports side of things, the special events, so the 24, the 12, they come around about every month, but I'm constantly doing sprint races throughout the week. I would say I potentially do about 4 or 5 a week. And then when I'm not doing that every day for about an hour, I'll be testing for the real life car and looking at data, making setup adjustments to see what would work to maintain my focus and ultimately come best prepared for Snetterton.
And then obviously with you mentioned earlier the karting and racing actual cars, the difference in like the physical demands. How regular would you say you're having to work on your physical condition? Are you doing it every day, every other day, and how important do you think that is currently?
It's definitely very important, especially as we get into the summer months now. It's going to be toasty, so I'm working my utmost to try and stay on top of it all. I train every single day. However, one day will be really intense workout, and then the next day will be a slightly less intense workout, just to give myself a little bit of a breather as well. Then it'll be back to intense and then non-intense. So although there's a few non-intense days, I'm constantly working out and trying to sustain my physical aspect for the real life car.
Then just for people that might be watching, either trying to get into racing or trying to get in better condition for racing, what would you say some key components are that you need to work on? Obviously, your arms, is it your neck? What would you say some key components are for racing?
So I can talk off of karting and Fiesta Junior experience. For karting, yeah, I would have to say the core would be a very important one. Arms and neck are the ones that would be worked the most. In the car itself, arms especially, where sometimes you're on one hand where you're doing the gear change, which is very physically intense as well. Braking, so legs need to be worked out a lot, and neck as well, especially through the high speed stuff. The G's definitely take a toll on your neck. So it's definitely very important to work on that as well, and core as well to maintain your posture throughout the race.
What would be the most physically demanding track you've done so far?
I'd have to say the most physically demanding would have to be Brands Hatch, I would say, purely because of the undulations. The curbs are quite aggressive. And because it's such a short lap, you're constantly fighting the car and turning the wheel, making gear shifts, and not even the main straight is straight. So you're constantly driving the car, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I love constantly being in the thick of it and amongst it, but it's definitely very physically intense around there.
Would you definitely say that going from one track to another can how long would you say with these physically demanding tracks, like obviously I'm assuming you ache after a very physically demanding race, how long is that for? Can that be something that goes the next day, or is it something you have to properly look after yourself afterwards, making sure you do all the right like stuff to cool down and get yourself back into the right condition?
So usually the day after the race weekend, I usually don't do any fitness, but I do a lot of stretching, just to loosen up my muscles. I have an osteopath as well, which really helps. Just make sure I'm free and loosened up as quickly as possible after the weekend, so then I can get straight back to training for the next one. Actually, over the weekend, you don't tend to feel it. There's a little break, so it'd be about a day. Then you really feel it the next day, after you've slept. So yeah, it definitely takes a toll, especially with like qualifying, free practice and three races. That's definitely a lot to ask. But that's where it's probably the most important, to stay up to date and stay, within shape and physically achievable.
And then also adapting on that, what would you say the average day for you throughout, whether it's a regular weekday or you're building up to a race weekend? What would you say the average day looks like?
So I'd wake up, have a healthy breakfast first of all. Then I tend to log on for my iZone driver performance meetings, which helps with my mentality, and gets me in the right frame of mind with some visualization. Then after that, it's usually fitness for myself. I like getting the fitness done nice and early. Then I would probably have some lunch, then do some simulator training, and then it would be some family stuff, so dog walking, dinner, potentially watching a few shows, and just chilling out, and then getting prepared for the next day. And depending if it's race week or not, I'll be packing bags, or it will be sim racing, so I'll be quite late on the sim. Usually that's when people, finish work or my teammates will be on, and then that's when I'll go on and put in the laps. So yeah, it just depends ultimately, but that is what a pretty solid day would look like.
Would you say definitely going on the sim helps build your confidence for the weekend? Do you still like, if you do more sim work, do you feel less nervous? If you do less sim work, do you feel more nervous? Or would you say overall you're pretty confident throughout race weeks?
I would definitely say I have to do quite a bit of sim training, just for my mental state, just to make sure I feel the most capable I could be. And yeah, I never like going into a race weekend thinking I could have done that, I could have done this. I want to be laser focused. So yeah, it definitely gets on my mind if I don't do enough sim training. But luckily, I've got the time on my hands now where I can put in that time and effort. Obviously, there'll be a few restrictions that won't allow you to do the training. But ultimately, so long as I've done a good amount of laps and I feel comfortable within the car, that will do me just fine for the race weekend.
And obviously, it says here that you do a lot of things to do with the air ambulance charity. Just a bit about how, because I remember I didn't do, I went to a karting race and I was photographing for a event where that was for the Yorkshire Air Ambulance Charity, and loads of people turned out to do with racing, which is quite good to see. So just a bit about like how that came along and how you continue to support that charity.
For sure. Well, my nan was saved by the air ambulance in the 90s, which they are very close to my heart. And it was a terrible road accident, and they managed to save both my grandparents, which meant a whole awful lot. And I wanted to give something back to a charity, and they were the first one that came to mind. So I contacted them, and now I'm a brand ambassador for them, which means I actually got invited to a karting event quite recently for them, funny enough. And I get invited, I carry their logo on my car, a few photo shoots, getting involved with the local community, which is always really nice to just help out and support everyone. Obviously, there's some terrible stories. Um, Bringing them back and giving the KSS the exposure that they need, to gain the funds that they need, definitely makes me feel very good. And yeah, just love supporting them.
I'm sure this is something that obviously not only you but your whole family is probably quite very proud of you for doing that. How would you say their reaction was to obviously finding out you was able to become an ambassador?
Well, my grandparents were quite in shock, and they were certainly very, very happy, quite emotional. And I've invited them down to quite a few things, where they're able to, get involved and talk to the crew, uh, of the helicopters. So it's fantastic to see the bond kind of coming back, to reality. And it just makes my whole family feel quite good to know that I'm supporting the people that supported them at the time, and that I'm able to support them in any way I can. It definitely makes my family very proud, and my grandparents are very proud of me as well. So yeah, I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
And then in the background, I can see, is that the obviously the blue helmet? Is that a colour that you've kept with you throughout the whole of like your journey from karting, or is it more of a recent thing? How have you gone with choosing that one?
So that is my championship winning helmet there, from 2022, and the one I raced with in 2023 as well. And blue is the color I've always stuck with. My brand here, you can see it is blue, and the t-shirt's blue. So, yeah, blue is my brand color, and the color I think looks the smartest. And it's something I wanted to keep consistent. So you'll see my last year's car and this year's car has different tones of blue. And it's something that pretty much you'll always see with myself. There'll be a blue background or blue hints here and there, which I always like to carry throughout, to keep it consistent.
Then obviously earlier you mentioned wanting to do either like endurance GT racing. Obviously becoming a GT Academy driver definitely helps with that journey. What would you say attracts you to that specific journey compared to, a lot of people that want to do single seaters, some people want to do other things. What specific about endurance and GT really attracts you to that?
So I like the team aspect, and the teamwork that goes with it. I love the cars. My dream car to race would be an LMP2, due to it being a real brute of a car, and just raw engine. I really love the thought of that high downforce, iconic races like Le Mans 24, Daytona 24, Sebring 12. That's the ultimate dream to win the endurance triple crown. But yeah, it's just the cars, the multi-class aspect, the grueling hours that could be so rewarding. And the closed-in cockpit, shall we say, really attracts my attention, rather than single seaters. And that's the ultimate dream I want to end up in.
Is that something that's it always been the same from ever since you started karting, or has it changed over time?
Yes, it's been very consistent. I never wanted to do single seaters. It's always been GT endurance. That's always been the focus, which has actually helped because then looking at championships, it's like this would be the best one suited for me. So yeah, it's always been GT endurance, and that is the pathway I want to follow throughout my career.
And obviously, from doing karting and always wanting to be consistent with the GT and endurance racing, do you remember the first moment that, whether it's to do with racing, obviously your family has a history of motorsport and racing, do you remember like your first ever moment? It don't have to be karting, just in general.
Um, I think I was about 3 years old and I was on a grass bank at Brands Hatch, watching the racing, and then it was like, oh wow, look at these fast cars, and going around a circuit, and then ever since then it's just taken off, and I've always wanted to do it. I was quite small, so I couldn't start that early, couldn't fit in anything, but then eventually managed to get my way into it, managed to wrangle my way into it, and it's just taken off from there, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
What do you think the next steps are then? Obviously, competing currently in the Ford Championship. What does the future look like for you? Do you think so far?
So far, the ultimate plan for next year, I've got a few personal things coming up in the winter, so I'm not sure whether or not I'll be able to race next year, or it will be a testing year and coaching, getting my name up there, networking sponsors, or something more predominant. Ultimately, I do want to be racing next year, so I think something down the GT Cup route, radicals, anything rear wheel drive, high downforce potential, or GTs, would be the ultimate dream, just to get my experience up, and again, getting with the same environment that could then lead on to something bigger and better.
And then would you say that obviously with these different categories comes different challenges? Would you say there's any challenges so far that has like made you the driver you are currently?
Think there's definitely points in my career that have shaped me. I've had a few real low moments. Rye House, I had a DNF, and last, I believe, and other places where I got last in a wet race, like I mentioned earlier. And these things make me more resilient, and just push me on, and spur me forward to try and get further improvement in myself, and just overall driving ability. So yeah, there are certain moments like that that really sort of make me want to improve and get better. And I think it's the negative moments that do build you as a character, overall.
Would you say you have any like pre-race rituals or any superstitions, or is it more of just turning up and just getting in the car?
Yes, I do have a few superstitions to say the least. I'll only run through a few, but for example, I always have to put my left boot and left glove on before my right glove and my right boot. Just something I've always done and it's always worked, so I don't want to change that. And there's a few other things like an hour before I'll take myself away, get ready, do some reaction training, visualization, breathing, and all of these things I have to keep the same, otherwise you never know what might happen. So I always like to keep it nice and consistent.
And then, do you have one word that could describe your current driving style?
Smooth, I think, would describe me. Ultimately, a lot of other drivers in the Fiestas like to throw them in, chuck them around, be quite slidey with them, whereas I'm more sort of through the fingertips, nice and smooth, getting it to the apex, letting it drift out. And I think that has always stuck with me from karting, being nice and smooth, and it's always worked. And it's just a driving technique that I prefer driving with. I don't like being sort of out of control to be quick. So I think that is one word to describe my driving style.
Then one of the last things is, for example, I know you mentioned earlier with the golf. What would you say your biggest like hobbies and passions are outside of racing?
So outside of racing, I would have to say golf. I've gotten into it quite recently, but it's something just to take my mind off. You don't think when you hit a ball, and it's just nice to do with family or friends. I love hiking. Again, that's just really good for the mind, and I like pushing my way through like especially higher mountain stuff. I really like. Um, I do like swimming and fitness as well. So yeah, there's quite a few hobbies that I like competing in, and I really enjoy. And it's something I'll definitely be doing a lot more of throughout the summer and into next year.
So everyone can obviously keep up to date with your journey and how you're doing. Is there any specific places where people can really help you on the journey in terms of following you, watching your races? If you want to just give a mention to.
For sure. So all my races, I don't believe Snetterton is live streamed, but the rest will be on Alpha Live on YouTube. The BRCC weekends, they'll always be live streamed. If you put in YouTube Fiesta Junior Championship Alpha Live, it'll always come up over the race weekends. I have a website, thomasmerrittracing.com, which you can visit and find more about myself. My Instagram handle, Thomas W Merritt _racing. My Facebook, Thomas Merritt. My TikTok, also Thomas Merritt, and I also have a YouTube channel, Thomas Merritt Racing. So all of those you can stay up to date with what I'm doing and when my next races are, and it would mean a whole lot for a follow or a few likes here and there.
No, thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's been a good conversation and good to learn more about. Obviously, there's different categories of racing. Everyone picks different ways, and it's good to obviously hear your journey and how you doing, and I hope the best for the future.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me and letting me on. It's been great to chat to yourself, and I hope all the viewers have picked up a little something from that. And yeah, hope to be speaking to you very shortly.